Hey everyone, welcome to our channel. Today, we're diving into creepiest and scariest unsolved mysteries. We'll be exploring strange cases that nobody has been able to solve yet. So, get comfy and prepare for some spooky tales. Don't forget to subscribe for more creepy content. The Circleville Letters is a weird one. Threatening letters for years in a small town. Eventually, a strong suspect emerges, but it's unclear why they sent all the letters. There may be phases. This went on for years. It is possible someone else started it and another, or several others, were copycats. There are podcasts. A good one is season 3 of Whatever Remains. Be warned though, after like 8 episodes, it stops, even though the podcasters seem to intend more. However, there's a sort of wrap-up on the 48 Hours podcast. It's possible the podcaster realized it seemed to be a cascading series of cans of worms inside cans of worms and gave up, realizing the futility of trying to get to the bottom of things. The Starchild skull. Most people will say it's just a deformed human child, but if you look deeper, the tests that have been done on it have confirmed that 1. The Starchild was not a child or baby but an adult, judging by the wear on the teeth, and 2. That the bone structure of the skull is not the same as human bone. You will find that the Starchild skull has been proven to have human DNA, which is true, but so do rats. Having the same DNA as a human does not make something a human, and there is not a full genetic sequence available. Furthermore, if the Starchild is truly a human with severe deformities, they should not have been able to grow or live in any capacity and should be a stillborn newborn skull, but it is clearly not, and on top of that, the skull is not all that was initially found. There was a full body buried in a shallow grave by a woman who seemed to have buried the Starchild and died by suicide. No one knows who she was or why she buried this being and killed herself, and the rest of the Starchild's bones were lost due to a flood. I'm not one to believe in cryptids, ghost stories, or the like, but y'all, I really don't think the Starchild is or was a human. At best, they were human hybrids. A local one from my city here in South Africa. A woman, by all accounts happy, successful, well-liked, and with lovely kids, goes missing before New Year's. They find her car parked near a local trail, not like an American woodsy trail, more like an open path along the beach, and a security camera confirms she was the driver. She goes missing. Police suspect she's been kidnapped. Problem is, she had told her father's children she was going to visit friends a few towns over, so she sent the kids to stay with him. Those friends claimed they never had plans to meet. She had left her phone in a drawer at home, and she had taken her grandmother's ashes with her. There were multiple search parties arranged, but she was never found. This included police divers checking the sea around the trail. There were a couple of reports of people claiming they had seen her barefoot, talking to herself in a town about 120 kilometers from here, roughly 75 miles, but nothing ever came of those reports. There were a few theories, but the most popular, but really not appreciated by her friends and family, is that she killed herself or purposefully disappeared and left her old life behind. None of her cards were ever used, and there was no large sum of money drawn from her bank account in the months leading up to then. Another theory, although a little far-fetched for people who knew her, is that she might have owed people money, but that doesn't really explain why she would lie to her children's father about leaving town to visit friends. Some think she may have drowned or been killed, but no one has turned up, and the trail was super busy in December. She just seems to have vanished. One from my home city of Adelaide in Australia, the mystery of the Summerton Man. In December 1948, the body of a well-dressed middle-aged man was found lying on the beach against a seawall in the suburb of Summerton Park. Speculation at first was that the man committed suicide, with no signs of foul play evident. However, after an autopsy, more investigation begins, and things start seeming strange. Firstly, all the labels on his clothing had been removed, with no identifying information present. The man was suspected to have died from possible poisoning. However, no foreign substance could be found in the man's system. The coroner ruling ultimately says, "I am quite convinced the death could not have been natural." In January, staff at Adelaide railway station discovered a brown suitcase believed to belong to Summerton Man. In the suitcase are a number of personal items that raise questions, one of which is a type of wax thread that wasn't available in Australia. The majority of the labels had been removed from the clothing in the suitcase, too. Police find the name T. Keen on a tie, however. Their first lead. An inquest into the man's death is launched, and this is where things get quirky. Around the same time as the inquest, a tiny piece of paper is found rolled up in the man's fob pocket, sewn into his trouser pocket. The piece of paper had 2 words printed on it, "To Mom Shoot." The translation for this phrase roughly means it is done or it is finished in Persian. Library officials, after some research, found that the phrase is used to conclude the final page of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a book of poetry by Persian astronomer-poet Omar Khayyam. Police begin a hunt for a copy of the Rubaiyat, missing its conclusion of Tamam Shud, hoping to find more clues. Upon finding the copy of the Rubaiyat, they notice the blank reverse of the last page as indentations, which turn out to be some form of encrypted message displaying the following. Erguabab mlaya oy utbimpanat x mlaya ba getmsumstgab. As of yet, the code has not been cracked. I truly recommend people have a read. The story goes deeper and deeper, with some suspecting the man to be a spy due to the emerging Cold War. There was also a South Australian woman interviewed by police who was suspected to have known the man. This woman once owned a copy of the Rubaiyat, but denied any knowledge or relation to the Summerton Man. Upon being shown a plaster death mask taken from the man, she was said to be visibly distressed to the point of almost fainting. In 2022, major inroads were made to possibly identify the man from the hairs taken from the plaster cast. As of yet, the South Australian police have yet to declare the case solved. I've had this story under my belt for a few years now, and at this point I'm just looking for input as to what could possibly have happened. Basically, a couple years ago, I sublet an apartment from an acquaintance. She was a friend of a friend, as well as someone I had a lot of mutual friends with. While I was staying there, she left her basic furniture but had one closet we had agreed she would keep her personal belongings in. I never went into the closet, as I respected her privacy and didn't think much about what was in there. One day, I came home from work and went straight to the shower. When you come into the apartment, the bedroom and living room, which were one shared space, are on the left, and the bathroom and kitchen are at the end of the hall. After my shower, I went to the kitchen to wash some dishes and get cleaning products under my sink, then returned to the bathroom to clean the bathroom. When I came back in, there was a giant pile of human hair that was completely dry. At first instinct, I thought I lost a bunch of my hair, but I realized very quickly that it was not mine. The hair was completely dry, and I had just used the shower. I obviously freaked out and called my good friend, who was my upstairs neighbor. She came down immediately, confirmed the hair was very strange, and someone obviously had to have put it there while I was washing my dishes. We called the police, who came and said it was the strangest thing he'd ever seen but that there weren't signs of forced entry, although the apartment was seemingly easy to break into. At this point, we called the girl who I was subleasing from to ask if she could make sense of the situation. She said that it was very strange, but the only thing she could think of was that in the closet with her belongings, she had left a box of her hair from when she had shaved her head the year before. We went in and found the box, confirmed it was the same hair, and sent her a picture. She then confirmed that it seemed like there was hair missing from the box. There was no possible way the hair was with me when I showered, so I can't put together how this happened without someone being in my apartment while I showered, waiting for me to go to the kitchen, and then throwing it in and leaving. I am at a loss for an explanation, and years later, I'm still left wondering. I moved in with the person I was dating right after, while still paying rent, and never slept there again. The girl I subleased from later thought or told people that she thought it was an elaborate plan I'd made up in order to keep the apartment, which I had never asked her to do in the first place and definitely didn't want to do after. Yuba County 5. 5 mentally handicapped men visit a basketball game in another city and know they have to drive home right after to be awake the next morning for their own game. For reasons totally unknown, they drive 80 miles out of the way and up a mountain in Yuba City, elevating enough to hit the snow line. Then they just walk into the forest, where 3 die in the snow from hypothermia. 2 make it to a forest ranger trailer, and months later, 1 man's body is found in the trailer with 3 months worth of beard growth, lost over 50 pounds, and was wrapped up in blankets in a ritualistic manner. The other man was never found. Why did they go up that mountain in the first place? There was a guy who went for a walk one day and didn't come back. His father was waiting for him and went looking for him by following his steps in the snow. The steps were leading to a frozen lake, but that's where they stopped. The footprints didn't continue anywhere, and the ice on the lake wasn't broken, so he didn't fall in. He returned home a month or so later, wearing new clothes and carrying a map. He said that he doesn't know what happened. He went for a walk, and the next thing he knew was that he was waking up in the middle of nowhere. His stuff was missing, but there was a backpack with food, water, new clothes, and a map that led him to his house. It took him a month to come back. When I was 6, my mom bought me this silver necklace. It was a really thin chain with a tiny silver dove pendant. I loved that necklace. When I was in 8th grade, my older sister asked to borrow the necklace for her senior portraits. I told her no, because she was notorious for losing jewelry and, in general, being stupid with borrowed stuff. Well, she stole the necklace out of my room and wore it to her portrait session. After her session was over, her boyfriend picked her up, and they went to the beach. Then out to eat. Then to a friend's house, and then they had sex at his house since his parents weren't home. During all this, she lost my necklace. I was so pissed, and I made her and her boyfriend retrace all their steps to try and find it. They couldn't find it. I was devastated. Fast forward, I was 21 and living in my first apartment. I had been living there since I was 18, with my best friend. I came home from one of my jobs and decided to clean. I scrubbed, dusted, did laundry, and finally decided to vacuum. As I was vacuuming the living room, the vacuum sucked up something from the carpet that didn't sound right. I turned off the vacuum and flipped it over to get whatever it was out of the brush. I took off the brush guard and saw a thin chain wound around the brush. I carefully unwound it, and it was my missing necklace. I have no idea how this happened. I still have the dove. The chain was broken beyond repair. For the skeptics out there, my sister had never been in my apartment. The vacuum I had bought was brand new 2 years prior. None of the furniture I owned was from my family home. There's absolutely no way it could have been rationally explained. And believe me, I looked for ways to explain it, including asking my friend if my sister had given her the necklace to plant. Of course, my sister hadn't, since she and my friend never hung out together. Everyone in my family was pretty tripped out by this, especially my sister. She told me that she was pretty certain that she had lost my necklace at the beach because they had been roughhousing in the water at the time. She had never told me about that before because she knew how pissed off I would be by her disregard for my property. A little while ago, I was at this bookstore, where I found this completely blank leather-bound journal. I took it home, opened it up, and wrote down a date for my first entry. My mind blanked at that point, so I put it in a drawer. A week later, I opened the drawer and opened the book, and it was completely filled, printed text, copyright page, everything. But the copyright date is 2014? There was no author mentioned anywhere in the book, and it was eerily similar to my at the time recent life. It was really freaky. I put the book back in the drawer. I researched the title, the publishing house, and the ISBN. This book did not exist. A week later, again, when I opened up the door to check the book again, it was gone. Nobody else in the house had seen it at all. Then, on December 31st, I woke up to a call from one of my friends telling me to get on video chat so we could talk when the ball dropped. I hang up, check my texts, and there's one from him saying, "Happy New Year." Dated December 31st, 2016. He never sent me a text. Then there was the time I woke up 3 hours before I went to bed. And then there was the time when my hair turned red for 15 minutes last summer. Like bright ginger red. I got out of the shower and dried, and it was red. I put it up in a hat, took the hat off, and it was back to brown. Then there was the time I got measured at the doctor's office, and it said I was 6 feet 1 inch. I'm 5 feet 1 inch. The numbers in the measure moved. My irises also flashed pink randomly for an entire day. I've also had various experiences where I've put a completely empty cigarette pack in my pocket, then pulled it out later to throw it in the trash, only to find a new cigarette or two in the pack. It was always this same pack, and it lasted for about a week. The weird thing was that it was a Camel pack, and the quantum cigarettes I was pulling out of it were Marlboro Smooths. I am hesitant to even write this because words on paper make it seem real, and I don't want it to be real. But it was, at least, I believe it was. Many years ago, when I was a senior in high school, I was at home by myself, as both my parents were teachers, and it was parents' night. I was in the kitchen fixing myself a bite. It was about dusk, when I heard a knock at the front door. Now this in and of itself was odd, as this was a small town, and pretty much anyone who comes to our house knows to come to the carport because the front door was rarely, if ever, used. I went to the door and opened it, leaving the glass storm door shut. Outside on my front porch stood 2 kids, a boy and a girl. For a second, I thought maybe someone had gotten their wires crossed and brought their kids to the teacher's house for parents' night, but that would be really strange, so I discounted the idea. I asked them, "Can I help you?" Thinking that maybe they were selling candy bars or magazines or Girl Scout cookies or popcorn or any one of the zillion things kids come around shilling. The little girl said, "Can we come in? We need to use your phone." Now, bear in mind that this was a small town, and at the time, it would have been no big deal to let someone, even a stranger, use the phone, particularly a child. I happened to have the cordless phone in my pocket, so I offered it to them, and the girl looked at me and said, "No, we need to come inside." I was about to let them in when, all of a sudden, I got hit with the most incredible sick horror feeling in the pit of my stomach. All the hair rose on the back of my neck, and I had a total fight or flight response that I had no reasonable explanation for. I am always inclined to listen to these responses, but my hand was going to the door to open it anyway, and it was like I couldn't stop myself, despite the cold, sweaty palm terror I was stricken with.
In the last second, I turned my hand from its path towards the latch, hit the light switch with my hand instead, and turned the porch light on.
The porch light lit these kids up, and I swear, they had the blackest eyes I've ever seen, like they were wearing those black full sclera contact lenses. I let out a squeak, slammed the door shut, and locked it behind me. The knocking started again almost immediately. I ran and locked all the other doors in the house, and I ran and hid in the dining room with my dog, who was growling like I'd never heard her growl before. Finally, the knocking stopped, and when it did, the feeling of terror lifted, and the dog calmed down. When my parents got home, I told them about it, but they thought I must have been sleeping and had had a nightmare. I did my best to put it out of my head and went on with life. I had myself half convinced that it was a dream or something I'd imagined, despite the fact that I am not the kind of person who does that sort of thing. I am calm, rational, and meet tales like these with questions and skepticism, so some sort of terror-driven paranoia home alone imagining was right out. It's also worth mentioning that I was completely sober and chemical-free at the time. A couple of years ago, I heard someone talking about Becks, or black-eyed kids, and all the old memories came flooding back. I did some internet research and found that so many people have had similar experiences to mine, almost down to the letter, and the cold feeling of horror, terror, and fear these kids emanate. I never open the door to anyone anymore without checking the peep, which is a safe thing to do anyway. I am sitting here, at work, in a room full of people, and when I think about this and those kids and their eyes, I get cold chills that won't quit. Someday, I'm afraid I'll see them again, and I won't be able to stop myself from letting them in. I was 10. I vividly remember every ounce of this feeling. September 10, 2001. I fucking tear up whenever I think about this. I live in Lower East Manhattan with a very clear view of all of downtown. So I'm laying in bed staring out my window, and this is what I feel and see. My covers are on my legs, and I'm staring at the WTC. Very clear night. I'm lost in my own little world. Then I daydream about an airplane hitting them. I start to sweat because it all seems so real. I hear police sirens. Now that my body is stuck in this position, I'm actually trying to move and run to my father, but I'm just stuck in this fear of what's going on. So my mom comes in and sees me sitting upright and sweating and starts asking what's wrong, which breaks me out of this trance. I tell her it's nothing and go to sleep. This is my strongest memory of a dream that I've had. I was dreaming, and it was the morning. I'm at school, and we get news that an airplane has hit the WTC. I kid you not. I shot up from my bed, and it was still around 4-ish in the morning, and I went to my parents' room terrified. They keep telling me it was a dream, but it felt way too real. Then, unfortunately, the next day, everything that happened in my dream played out. Not exactly, but for the most part, it was spot on. To this very day, only 3 people know this. My eyes tear up, and my body shivers when I think about it. I live in Chicago. It's a very big and beautiful city, and ironically, it's also the city in the Matrix, same street names, etc. One of my hobbies on extremely nice days is to go downtown and follow odd-looking people around to see what they're doing. I think this is called being a flâneur, in French, and I've experienced some really weird things while following people that could be equated to Matrix glitches, even though I've never really had that thought before. The one that stands out in my mind as the most Matrixy was a few summers ago. It was a Saturday, and I was downtown with a parkour training group. The session was wrapping up at around 6 p.m., and everyone was getting ready to go home or somewhere else. I was sitting in a large tree we liked to climb and was looking down on an extremely odd man who had been watching us literally all day, since 10 a.m. He was in his late 20s, I'd assume, thin but muscular, and wore sunglasses, a bright green and pink short-sleeved collared shirt, and cargo shorts. He just sat there for the entire 8 hours and didn't fucking move aside from maybe shifting in his seat whenever he saw something that impressed him. At this point, only 4 people were left lingering. 1 tracer, his 2 female friends, and myself. The man got up, went over to the group of 3, and said something. It looked intense, and the 2 girls stood bolt upright while the 1 male threw his hands up in the air and had them drop to his sides quickly in a wild shrugging gesture. They were just out of earshot. I jumped down from my tree and stumbled, botching the landing, over to the trio. Apparently, the man had left, and I saw him walking briskly down the stairs towards Michigan Avenue, the main street of downtown Chicago. I was intent on following him, but I wanted to make sure he wasn't crazy first. When I got to the remaining 3 youths, the 2 girls just stood there in the same position they were before, completely quiet. I asked about the man, to which the male replied, sounding rather offended, "What man? It's just me and these 2 here." For a brief moment, his face took on a strained look as if trying to remember the man, like he should remember the man, but the look vanished as quickly as the man had. When it was clear that he wasn't going to say anything on the matter, I turned and jogged down the stairs towards Michigan Avenue. I looked left and right, then left again, and right again. I couldn't spot the guy. It had been less than a minute since he began walking, and he was already out of sight. He could have crossed the street, but he would still have been waiting for a break in the traffic to do so. Other than that, the street was weirdly void of pedestrians. There was an open park to my right and rushing traffic to my left, and not a man in sight. Then I heard a scream from behind me and ran back to the park to see the 2 girls looming over the guy. I pushed them back and saw the male, who had slumped over, out cold and drooling a mixture of blood and spittle. He looked like he had just been beaten badly, he just really had the snot knocked out of him. He was a pretty big guy, one of the most muscular guys I know. He could have taken 2 or 3 of anyone else in the park, no problem, but there he was down for the count. I asked the girls if they had seen what happened. They said he was talking to himself and then just fell over. I told one to call an ambulance and continued to question the other one. I asked about the man. They said they didn't remember any men. I asked if they remembered me coming over there, they didn't remember that either. Very odd. The ambulance arrived very shortly after and took the slumped over mess away on a stretcher as I sat there trying to explain, in detail, the events of the last 10 minutes to these girls, who would just not believe me about the man in neon green and pink.